Because I think that we sense that what's happening in the economy and what's happening with money and what's happening with the economy, we sense that it's not like some little blip, some little bump in the road that we can smooth out and everything's going to keep going back to normal. But we sense that the crisis of money goes in some way all the way to the bottom, and it's tied in with everything else. And it's not hard to understand why we would think that, because money seems to be linked to everything that's happening. I mean, as they say, money makes the world go round. And probably most people in here are activists of one sort or another, or have passionate beliefs about what's wrong with the world and how it can be improved, and political views. And when you investigate any of these issues that are present for us today, and you ask, why is this happening? It doesn't take long, 2 or 3 whys down the road, you get to, well, somebody's making money off of it. You can't escape money. You really can't almost talk about anything without talking about money. And in all of these issues, it seems that money isn't our friend. The beautiful things that we want to create, the healing that we want to make happen on this earth, money is usually on the other side. You can make a lot of money, for example, by becoming a lobbyist for a petrochemical company, lobbying Congress to relax restrictions on dumping toxic waste. There's a lot of money in that, but there's not a lot of money in going and cleaning up toxic waste. Money isn't your friend when you're trying to heal the planet, or even on a personal level. Often the beautiful things that you want to do, or just the things that you're in love with, there's no money there. Say you're an artist and you just want to create this beautiful art and make beautiful things, but have you ever talked to the career guidance counselor and the counselor says, well, you could go into graphic design. Like, why? Why should it be that way? Why should money be not our friend? Because really, money, it's just a social agreement. At bottom, it's what society says has value. Why have we decided that paving over a wetlands has value and restoring a wetlands does not have value? What is it about money that makes it into a force? That's kind of the starting question in this book. And it's not a rhetorical question. The question is answered, and the answer then points the way to how money could be something else, how money could be something that you might call sacred. In other words, money being aligned with the beautiful things that we're coming to value today, the things that we want to create on Earth. The other reason I call it sacred economics is a bit more general. It's about healing this divide between spirit and matter, this division of the world into 2 parts, one material or fleshly, and the other spiritual or of consciousness or of the mind, these 2. Really, what we need is to treat the earth as sacred, and the earth is spiritual, and all matter is spiritual. It's not a matter of becoming less materialistic, but I would say becoming more materialistic, loving matter more, loving the earth more, and ending the separation between spirit and matter. And these sound like kind of generalities, but I'm going to try to make them very specific today. The problem with money today, and this is simplifying it a bit, but the problem with money today has to do with the way that it's created and the way that it circulates. It's created as interest-bearing debt. There's other problems with money too, besides this, but this is the big one. So it's created as interest-bearing debt. M0, as they call it, base money is created when the Federal Reserve buys an interest-bearing security on the open market, like a treasury bond or something like that, or junk mortgage things. And so the Fed's balance sheet, the amount of these interest-bearing assets on its balance sheet is always greater than the amount of money, than the amount of base money. The same thing is true of M1 and M2, other categories of money that banks lend into existence. So if I'm a bank and you come to me for a loan, say you want to borrow $10 million, maybe you have a good business idea, and I say, sure, here's $10 million, you owe me $20 million over maybe 10 years, right? Well, maybe that's not a problem because you're going to build a solar panel factory, and you're going to create an awesome restaurant and give people lots of great food, and they're going to be happy to pay for it, and you're going to make the world better, okay? And you're going to pay me back that $20 million, and you're going to get rich yourself, okay? Right? No problem, right? The problem comes when everybody's in the same boat, because all money originates in the same way. So in other words, there's always more debt than there is money. In other words, everybody is always in competition with everybody else for never enough money. It's mathematically part of the system. It's built that way. No matter how much, even if you say lots of New Age mantras about abundance and prosperity and there's enough for everybody. And I'm not actually disparaging those. They're kind of an easy target. And they might be true for one person, but the nature of money is that it has scarcity built into it. It's like a game of musical chairs. No matter how abundant in your attitude you are, there's never enough chairs. There's always, that's the way that the system is set up. We're always in competition for not enough money. The only way you can pay back your 20 million is to take that from somebody else. Everybody's in that boat. Now, you may not actually be an entrepreneur. Maybe you're just going to work for somebody. And why will they give you a job? It's because they're going to help you make that money. Ultimately, all money originates in this way. Now, the situation isn't quite as bad as I said, because there's a complicating factor here, which is growth. So everybody's getting $10 million, and they have to pay back $20 million. That means half the people are going to have to go bankrupt, right? Well, no, because by the time all of these debts come due, I'm going to have created even more money. So the old loans will be paid off with the new loans, but that creates even more debt. But that's okay. I'll create even more money in the future, forever and ever and ever. Yeah, right? Sounds quite reasonable. And it would be reasonable if we had an infinite planet. If we could continually create new goods and services. The reason that you don't like Monday, and the reason that money does not seem to be your friend, is because of what I call the iron law of money. It says, money shall go to he or she who will make even more of it, or who will work for somebody who will make even more of it. Now, what kind of things can you do to make more of it? Well, you could maybe drill for some oil or cut down a forest or create a service to sell to somebody. Whatever it is, though, it has to be a service that is sellable for money. So if you go to the bank and you say, I'll be the banker today, okay? So you say, Charles, I'd like to borrow $10 million to restore this wetlands. And I'll be like, okay, but what product are you going to create? Where's your business plan? And you say, well, I really am. I'm not going to sell it. That's the guy over there who wants to pave it over. I don't want to do that. I'm sorry, I can't give you that loan. Only if you make a product out of it. Say that you want to teach people how to do things for themselves. Say you want to start a neighborhood child care co-op so people don't have to pay for daycare anymore. Say that you want to go and just help homeless people. Like, say you have some beautiful thing that you want to do. If you're not making products and selling them, then no money for you. Now there's some exceptions to this. They're called gifts. Sometimes people will give you money for doing something even though you're not going to make them more money in return. And that's actually the key to right livelihood today, if you don't want to participate. Conversion of the world into money. Okay, so what I'm saying basically is that money forces us into competition, creates artificial scarcity, separates us from each other, causes and necessitates endless growth. The other thing it does is it destroys community. The reason it destroys community is that community is woven from gifts. You can't have community without gifts. As you may have noticed, if you go to suburbia and you try to create community, as I did when I moved back to America after living abroad for a long time, and I thought, well, I'll start community in my neighborhood and I'll be really nice to people, I'll invite them over to my house. And eventually I realized why it wasn't working. It was because everybody underneath had the unspoken knowledge that I don't need you. Because I meet all my needs by paying for them. And in fact, I don't want to need you. I want to be financially independent. I don't want to have to depend on anybody. I don't want to have to owe anybody anything. But real community isn't like that. Real community, you need each other. You need each other to supply the necessities of life and the pleasures of life too. So you go back a generation. In my childhood, there were a lot of things that we didn't pay for that people pay for today. For example, childcare. Like we got home from school and we ran around the neighborhood and we could go into anybody's yard. Everybody's yard was our yard, except for that mean lady. And we could even go into people's houses and get fed snacks. So childcare was generally not a service in the economy. Neither was cooking. Today, 2/3 of all meals, I've read, are prepared outside the home. You go to the supermarket, you get the deli food, you take it home, put it on the table, that's dinner. But when I was a kid, Mom cooked dinner. She bought raw ingredients and she cooked dinner. So we didn't pay for food preparation. And you always saw neighbors helping each other out with projects. People would maybe even fix their own roof. They wouldn't necessarily hire a roofer, but you would fix your own roof, you do your own projects, and people would help each other out, and they wouldn't pay for that either. You take it back another generation, before television, and before television, to my father's generation, when he was a kid, he said every Sunday, the whole neighborhood would get together and they would sing folk songs and play guitars. So they weren't paying for entertainment. We didn't pay for play when I was a kid. We're paying for the things that we once got for free. Take it back 3 or 4 generations, like people didn't pay for housing very often. They built their own houses. They sang all of their own songs. They created their own dramas. They didn't pay for medicine. Various village grandmothers knew about herbs and they did most of the medicine. Well, all of this is invisible to economists. All of these things that we do for each other that create community, that make us value each other, these are invisible to economists. And economists would say, well, when you start paying for childcare and paying for food and paying for medicine, then you're all better off. GDP has gone up. GDP goes up and there's more lending opportunities. That's what the politicians are talking about when they're saying we've got to boost consumption, boost demand to increase economic growth. Because now, hey, here's a business opportunity. You can start a childcare business. You can start a lawn mowing business. You can start a house cleaning business. You can start a food preparation business. You can start something and make people pay for things that they once did for each other. So basically what's happening is you're strip mining community. Because I'm actually really optimistic, and I'm painting a really beautiful vision. I think it's beautiful, at least, of what our society could look like. The optimism that I express isn't coming out of an ignorance of the magnitude of the crisis. Because otherwise it wouldn't be authentic, you know? So the good news is that there's not really very much community or nature left to convert into product and into services. There's not much left, and that's a problem from the point of view of the money system. Because the money system stops working if there's no growth. Because how are all these debts going to be paid if I can't lend new money into existence? I can't lend it into existence if there's no new opportunities to create goods and services. And that's what we're seeing happening today. The banks aren't lending. There aren't any lending opportunities. Not enough to keep pace with the growth of debt. So the debts grow faster than our incomes. When that happens, the system can stay solvent for a little while by, if I can't take from your increased income, I can take the things you already have. I can take your house, your car, your pension fund. I can take, and I can make you pledge your future income. And I can take all of that. But then that only works if we're going to return to growth sometime. And we can't, because there's not much more that we can pay for, that we don't pay for already. And we've postponed this crisis for a long time. Like, well, how about other countries? There's other countries where people still do things for each other. Let's force them into the money economy. That's called opening new markets. And so we did that. Or you can have a war and destroy some things, and then you can create new goods and services to replace the ones that were destroyed. But we're having a big crisis now because colonialism has basically run its course. The colonized countries are beginning to resist. I mean, there's still some room left to strip mine their communities, but that is running out of room. Total war is no longer an option. War can't proceed past a certain point before we begin nuking each other. So too bad, that solution's out. There's not that much more of nature that we can convert into product either. We can't increase the fish catch anymore, or the amount of oil being drilled, or the amount of board feet of lumber being harvested, or the amount of atmosphere that we convert into waste. That's all running out too. So when the politicians say we've got to reignite demand, they're trying to do something that's no longer possible, and it can only be done for a little while longer at a higher and higher cost. Like, if we build the Keystone Pipeline and do some fracking and mountaintop removal and drill in the wildlife refuge, maybe we can eke out a few more years of tepid economic growth, but not enough to make the system really work. So the system is falling apart, and if you want to make it fall apart faster, then you can protect anything that's good and beautiful, because that deprives the system of food. So if you stop, if you stop a road, stop some development from happening, teach people how to do things for themselves, teach people how to heal themselves, spread knowledge about herbal medicine, spread knowledge about nutrition, reskill, have reskilling workshops, learn how to cook again, teach people how to garden again, do permaculture, all that kind of stuff. That deprives the machine of its food. It hastens the crisis, but it also mitigates its severity because it means that there will still be some wealth left after things fall apart. And the collapse will look less like a collapse and more like kind of you know how it is when things fall apart, don't you? And I gave the economic reason for it because it reduces the amount of room for growth. But there's also what you might call a spiritual reason for it. And this is the reason that we can feel in our hearts, even when our logic can't figure out why. Like, why should it be significant to just do these small acts of generosity? I'll talk a little bit about the shift in logic that is healing this divide between what we know in our hearts and what is reasonable. Because I said that the economic crisis goes all the way to the bottom. So what's really transitioning here? I mentioned that money is nothing but an agreement. You could say it's a story. It's a system of interpretations of symbols. That's what gives it its power. And the story of money is tied to deeper stories that are invisible. And those are what I call the defining myths of our civilization. And there's really two of them that are primary. One of them is the story of the self. Every culture has one, and it answers the question, who are you? What is it to be human? And therefore, what's important in life? What's valuable? What's the purpose of human life? And the answer to the question, who are you, in our culture has been, well, what you are is a discrete, separate being in an external universe, separate from other discrete, separate beings. Now, you might be thinking, this story is obsolete. Like, I don't believe in that anymore. I believe in something else. I believe in, I don't think I am separate from other people. I don't think I am separate from the universe. I think we're all together, right? This is the new consciousness.